Welcome to the MuseCast, where we squeeze every last drop of inspiration out of Sunday's sermon.
Happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday.
It is a happy Tuesday.
It is a happy Tuesday. Welcome to the MuseCast. He is Dan Kent. I am Shawna Boren. And like Dan just said, as he was pushing record, we are happily, calmly,
that's right,
ready professionally to go and bring you today's show. Dan, I just want to say bravo, my man. I mean, we're going to get into it, of course, but the biggest, most glaring, amazing takeaway from Sunday, you looked snappy. You had on a pretty nice fit. You looked all bedazzled. People were like, what's going on? People were chatting about it. It was fantastic.
People weren't expecting it. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. It's just a button, And but apparently, compared to what I normally wear, which is probably, it looks like I'm cleaning the garage or something. But I guess it was a step up from what I normally wear. The truth is that I only have I have 3 pairs of shoes. I've got a pair of boots for doing yard work. I've got my running shoes, and then I've got these dress shoes. And I went for a run Sunday morning, and my shoes got sopping wet. And I realized, as I got home, that every step I took, it went slosh, 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 slosh. And it's like that's not going to work on the stage. So I didn't have time to dry them. So I put my dress shoes on, and I realized that the dress shoes and the t-shirt and jeans, it was a weird vibe. So I put my button up on, and it was different. It felt good though. It was very I could move around and stuff still. So that's what I worry about.
You were great. You were very agile on the stage, got to move back and forth. You even placed your Bible back by the instruments and stuff at one point because it was getting a little scary. It was nice, Dan. It was nice. I'm glad that wardrobe consultant I sent your way, I'm glad you took some advice.
Yeah.
Kidding.
Hey, you know what? The truth is I did get I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called Stitch Fix or something like that. I hate shopping for clothes. So I did order that just to try it out. So it's I don't know if I'm going to do it anymore, but it was fun to kind of get something, because then I have to go shopping, and that's why I have just all these black t-shirts and jeans where I don't have to think about it,
Just boom, bam, done. Your brain has other things to think about, Dan.
Thank you for recognizing that and acknowledging that. I've got silly jokes to come up with. Yes. I've got puns to write and haikus. You're right. Yes.
Plus, you let us know that you're about 1,500, which that seems low. Did you say 1,500 words? No, it couldn't just be 1,500 words. Pages, maybe, into your Revelation study?
Yeah, right. Yes. Pages. Yes.
Pages.
Yeah.
Come on, Shawna.
Yeah.
Not books.
No, pages.
Books on one extreme, words on the other. Pages. 1,500 pages.
And sometimes that could be enough to give you a good grounding. But it depends on the books you read. So I like to get to about 10,000 pages is where I kind of feel like, okay, now I understand the scope of everything, and not quite there yet, but definitely have a couple. It helps when you have somebody who knows a lot curate the books for you, so that they say, here, read these. And then, because then you don't have to read all of these dead end books that aren't really all that helpful. And so I feel like, even though I'm at 1,500 pages, I feel like I'm closer to the 10,000 line than I would be if I started this all on my own. So
I think that's such a great point, Dan, and this all has a point. So as you guys are looking into researching and studying alongside the series, that's why I think it's so great that we share these resources that are used, because there are some places that can kind of take you on a detour, and we don't want that. I myself am about 7 pages in, so I got some work to do.
Okay, now the table of contents does not count.
I know.
Just so you know,
Darn it! No, the acknowledgments, does that count? Oh, all right. Save me here. In all seriousness, you, my friend, did a fantastic job on Sunday. And I even said, and I meant it in the pastors meeting, we could just move on to the next. I feel like it was great. It was encouraging. It was like, don't be afraid of all this stuff. It points to Jesus. And that's going to be okay. So I thought, let's just end there and
we could start Christmas now. I mean, let's do it.
We could. Why not? So, yeah. Movies are already showing. So why not?
Are they really?
Gosh.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. Yes. However, again, we're going to get into it, the nitty gritty of it all. I know there are things that you left out, but I just want to thank you. I thought it was so, so good. And I honestly would not mind if that was I know there's more to learn. I know that,
there's
but
a lot of
I just
good
thought
stuff.
I thought it was so good. So I look forward to hearing your summary and then having a little discussion about it, hearing what you left off, because I know that you left some stuff out. And
yeah. Well, thank you so much for that. Did you know that was my 30th full sermon at Woodland Hills? So yeah. So I don't know if, I think you could probably celebrate 100 and celebrate 1,000, but I'm glad I made it to 30. We're
going to celebrate 30. I like that number. That was my basketball number, Dan.
Was it really?
It really was.
Wow. That's awesome.
30. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Were you a shooter? I mean, would you say your strength was shooting or defending?
Oh, so a little of both. So I'm not the tallest tool in the toolbox, right? So, however, surprisingly, I was really great rebounding. So I would play the 4 a lot of times because I had some ups back in my day. So So then people would assume guard because I'm 5'5".
That's what I would have assumed. Yeah.
Yeah. But I played that 4 and I kind of
that's awesome.
knocked some of those girls around.
That is really, really cool. I wish I would have played basketball. Anyway, yes. The unveiling is the series that we're in. I had no idea where I was starting. I'm just like, let me look down and see the first word I see. The unveiling. Yes, there it is. So that's the series that we're in. The sub-series that we're starting here, this is our 3rd sermon in, is Do Not Be Afraid. And that's a message that I'm really glad we're starting with that, because the book is so weird and because so much fear-mongering has been built off of this. And the book has been used, I think, in very manipulative ways by religious leaders for a long time. And so I'm really happy that we're starting with that. I'm looking at a verse, chapter 1, verse 3, which says, "Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and who keep tereo." That's actually Spanish. That's not Greek, but yeah, it's tereo. It's to keep what is written, for the time is near. And that word "keep" is key because it really has this implication of defending it. It's like this very active word. It's this living word, and I think that's important because I think that the whole gist of my sermon, anyways, I wanted to highlight the fact that God is calling us into this living faith. And so I really focused on that word. And sort of my hook for the sermon was just comparing and contrasting the use of tereo here in Revelation with the Gospel of John. And just when Jesus says in the Gospel of John, "If you love me, tereo my commands." Well, let's take a look at what some of those commands are. And they're these very Christian-y, loving commands: serve one another and love one another and build one another up and forgive one another and all of that. And that's all very nice. And so now we go back to Revelation and say, okay, keep the words of this prophecy. And you would kind of hope something like that would come up again. But instead, you've got these armored locusts torturing people. And you've got this glowing woman on the moon who's giving birth while a dragon waits to devour her child. Just stuff like that. That's like, whoa, how do I keep that? How do I tereo that? And as a hook, that just, it really showed me that, hey, what Greg has been saying is exactly right. That this is a special kind of book. You can't take the images at face value. You can't get obsessed about the images because that will misguide you with the book. And that really becomes obvious when you realize the type of book this is. Paul Eddy is, he's such a blessing, but he is also an oralities study kind of I don't know, hotshot. I mean, he's like probably one of the foremost people on this. Certainly more than anybody else I know. Like if you do a search for theological orality studies, I'm guessing Paul Eddy will come up somewhere in there. But it's yeah. So I'll come back to that. But the point is that he considers this part of Asia an oral culture because the literacy rate back then was only between 5 and 15%. So these people would take this writing, this prophecy, and one person who could read would read it to the whole church, and which is very efficient. You know, you look at all of us who are like driving around listening to audiobooks and stuff like that, and it's like, well, why not just all come together and have one person read it in one sitting, and then we've all read the book, and that's it's not very practical, but you get why it's a very efficient way of communicating it. But the point is that because it was all read in one sitting, that it was all kind of captured and communicated in a way where we're not supposed to obsess over the details of the images. We're supposed to see the lamb, the slain lamb, underneath all of those images, and you can kind of tell that that's the case because the story keeps coming back again and again to this slain lamb. And so that's like a ding indicator. This is what's important. And this is the slain lamb. It doesn't come back to the armored locusts ever. It doesn't come back to the glowing woman ever. It doesn't come back to the beast with the 7 heads ever. It comes back to the slain lamb over and over and over again. So that is the point of it. I wish I would have shared that. That's a good way of stating how we know that this is the point. Anyway, so what I looked at is if that's the case, if we're supposed to focus on the slain lamb underneath all of these other images, then it becomes problematic when people focus on the images instead of the slain lamb. And that's exactly what happens is people start to interpret and make theologies based on these images that weren't meant for theology. They were meant to provoke a response. And if you build a theology on something that was just meant to provoke a response, you're probably going to get a very sensationalized theology, but you're going to be missing the point. And so Greg talked about escapist kind of rapture theology. And I really focused on using the Bible as a crystal ball to interpret future events. And I argued, and I think I introduced this last week, I argued that when you do that, you are kind of accidentally turning God into wood because, Jeremiah tells us in Jeremiah 10 that, the Israelites had lost their minds and they were worshiping these wooden gods that they made. And they basically, God and Jeremiah are mocking these people for how dumb they are for really thinking that God could do nothing. It doesn't breathe. It doesn't walk. It doesn't do anything. And look at how silly these people are. Well, I argued that when the future is meticulously planned out and there's just this big script, God inevitably turns into that same type of wood because he doesn't do anything. He doesn't live and breathe and so forth. But what we see in the scriptures as a whole is that God is a living God. He is alive. He's thundering through creation. He's doing things, and and his creation itself is alive, and he's reigning over this living creation, and he's calling us then into this living, dynamic kind of faith. And I just think that that's so important for kind of orienting ourselves for what exactly is going on here. And a living faith then is a faith that does stuff, and tereo is the perfect word for that because it is an active, living activity. You're defending it. That implies that whatever it is you're defending might be under attack. And so you have to constantly be on guard and constantly wrestling with these ideas and so forth. And then I finished with a couple takeaways. I sort of ran out of time and I kind of hurried at the end, but this idea that God is looking down for people looking up. I mean, that's what it looks like when God is calling us into something alive. He's looking for people who want to participate, and he'll use anybody. And it doesn't have to be someone who is, on stage or a writer or any of the Christian hotshots or anything like that. In fact, I would argue that most of what God does is done in the trenches, is done in day-to-day life, and that's where the power is, even when it is on the stage. And I shared David as an example. You become that in the small moments of life. You gain those skills, you gain that wisdom in day-to-day life, not on the stage or not in the world of books. And then the final kind of takeaway idea is that, if we're going to be participating in a living faith, then we need to get involved in something. We have to be doing stuff. And so I just encourage people to get involved, and let me just say, I was very proud of that. I'm trying to get better at the end of my sermons, because one of my sermons a long time ago, I said, well, that's all I've got. And so I've just been teased relentlessly by Greg and Mary for that. So I've been trying to transition and close it off nicely. And this served as a really nice transition into gathering groups. You get involved. You could get involved in gathering groups, for instance.
That's right.
And yeah, it was nice. So that is the sermon.
Good job, Dan. That's all we got today, folks.
Yeah, that's it. That's all I got.
I will say, to that point, I do remember that sermon, because thankfully, I think I was in the gathering area. I think I literally laughed out loud. That's my sermon. It's like, okay. So funny. However, I will say, since then, you are the best at transitioning to those closing announcements, because most of us will just treat them as closing announcements, but you take the end of your sermon and then you weave it into gathering groups.
Here's my goal. Here's my goal. This is like a shop talk is what this is. This is sermon shop talk. My goal is to get those announcements done without people realizing that we've moved into announcements, because my goal is to finish my sermon and the announcements without anybody getting up yet. That's my goal. I love it. So, and I know people have to go get their kids and stuff like that. I get that, but it's still, I do consider it a chess match. So
it is truly. So, hey, you guys tuning in, don't tell Dan's secret, because I think others of us are going to utilize it, because these are important announcements that need to be heard.
That's right.
Oh goodness. Great summary, Dan. I'm going to share some highlight points for me from your sermon, but I am also really looking forward to hearing what was on the cutting room floor, as we like to say. Okay. Well, first, I love the point that you made in your sermon, but you made even better here in your summary about the slain lamb. It's just beautiful, perfect imagery. And it reminds me, unfortunately, of my very first Thanksgiving with the Borens. Have I told you this story, Dan?
No.
My very first Thanksgiving with my new in-laws, because Scott and I got married at the beginning of November, and of course Thanksgiving's at the end of November, and so we're at his parents' place, and they were still on the farm, and we're sitting there about to eat, and a couple of guys come up to the window, the sliding glass door to the patio, and they knock and pop my father-in-law. He's like, "Oh, be right with you," and he gets up and he goes out to deal with them, and I'm like, "Well, what's going on?" And Mama, my mother-in-law, was like, "Oh, they're here for a lamb." I'm like, "Oh, that's so sweet."
Oh no.
I was thinking maybe they had a kid and they were going to gift the kid with this cute little lamb.
Oh no.
Oh, no. And right then and there, before I ever took a bite, I learned why they were there for the lamb. And I was so mortified. It was, it was shocking. It was awful. I couldn't eat, and I am a vegetarian. Let me just let you know that now. I wasn't then, but I am now and have been for a while.
Wow.
Anyway, made it through that traumatizing moment.
Yeah, I have a lot of farm families and meat eating families, and that I'm part of my lineage, and we're all meat eaters, except for me, apparently.
Yeah.
But none of us ate lamb though. That's an interesting. I'm glad. I don't think I could handle that.
Yeah, so. I think they were another culture for sure. I don't remember what, but yeah. So it was just like, they came to Pop to get their lamb to slaughter. Oh my gosh. Any whoozy doozy. I love the way that you started out. I thought it was such a great illustration, although the movie was horrific. Just in talking about The Omen. I mean, but I do think, and yes, that's Hollywood, but there have been so many people for the longest of time that have kind of done that. They have taken this book and it's like they try to map out what everything means and, you know, have a pie chart of what all this could be. And I think that we're really missing the intent of why this book is there, if that's what we're doing with it. So I thought that was a great way to start your sermon. I thought it was a great way just to kind of show that's really not what we're supposed to be doing here. And I love the way that you explained Tereho, and just that the imagery was so clear to me about the keeping and the defending and it's active and it's alive as God is active and alive. He's not just this spirit that's afar off and distant or dead or, you know, something in the past. Like this is like a living, active situation that we're involved in. So I love that. Look down, God is looking down for those who are looking up. Loved that. And I think ultimately through it all, as you were talking, it made me come back to something that we say at Woodland Hills all the time. Like when you encounter scripture passages that seem to contradict who we know Jesus was, is, and always will be, the character of Jesus, what we've seen through the Gospels. Whenever we come across scripture that seems to make us go, wait, what?
Yeah.
We have to know something else must be going on, and we got to dig a little deeper. And I think this series is a great example of that. Like we see all of these images, and like you said in your sermon, there is no way that God just changed his mind all of a sudden and was like, I know we said all this in the Gospels, and I know we were looking at Jesus, and we know he's supposed to be the center of it all, but nah, never mind.
Yeah.
Let's just, bloody them all and like just go to war and it's going to be great. You know, I don't think that was the point. So yeah, I think you just did a great job with all of that. And the question that I keep asking myself is like, if what we are keeping, if the commandments and the things of our faith that we are supposed to be keeping, defending, I thought you made that really clear. But the question that kept coming to me is that, well, what is it that we're defending? If we're not like actively defending our faith, or if we are actively defending our faith, what does that look like? Like, what is it that we're defending? And I think a lot of that, the answer to that question is played out in just the polarities that I think we're seeing in the world. I think people feel like they are defending their faith. And so they're in this camp, and these other folks feel like, no, they're defending their faith in this way. And I think we've gotten lost in all of it. Yeah. So anyway, I'm just rambling because I have so many different little notes that I took. And finally, I will just say this. I think for those of you who tune in weekly to the MuseCast, you guys are so, you're kind of VIPs because you heard some stuff on Sunday from Dan that he kind of introed here on the MuseCast last week, like the wooden, God's not wooden. And you talked about how the danger of reading Revelation literally is just the same as reading the Gospels allegorically. So yeah, it was good stuff. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to hearing more from you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. There was a lot that I cut out. Really what I first of all, doing the MuseCast does help a lot, by the way. That's very helpful. But I wanted to look at more examples of in the Bible where people will do things and like how do I explain it? Like when you have this like crisis moment or this big scene that's this pivotal sort of moment, how we handle that, it doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's the result of a life of, tereoing, of wrestling with the truths of God and straining to be more and more Christ-like and doing things. And so like, one of the things I cut out is the story of Joseph. I keep coming back to, where you have like this kid who has this really bizarre I call it like superpower, because nobody else seems to care about these things except for him. And he's just fascinated with dreams and kind of analyzing the world through these dreams. And it gets him into trouble because the dreams are telling him that he's destined for something great, and that makes his brothers envious, and that's what gets him thrown into these slave camps and abandoned by his family, and then on these slave farms he gets falsely accused of sexual assault and thrown into prison, and even then he's still loyal to God, and he's still listening to God, and he's still pursuing this kind of like trying to get in touch with what God is doing in the world, and he uses these dreams as this medium for kind of ascertaining that, and then it just so happens that it's that which kind of makes him valuable, where the king wants these dreams analyzed, and that sort of ends up getting him exalted, and all of that to bring him to this table where he can either get his vengeance against his family, or he can reconcile with his family. And the whole story just shows all of the misfortune and all the bad things that happened to Joseph. And yet he just remains listening to God, and he remains, wrestling. I think he's tereoing the little bit of God that he had. And at the very end, he chooses to continue to tereo. He chooses to continue to protect that goodness and that mercy and that grace and that love. And I just think that's, those moments like that aren't accidental. They're the result of a life of tereoing, and which isn't to say that if you are a new believer, you're screwed or anything like that. It's just to say that, the dull moments of the day, that when things, you may look at your life and say, well, my Christian life isn't all that exciting or whatever, but it is, because that's when you start to think through these things. What does it mean to love others in a Christ-like way? And what does it mean to, build one another up and to reconcile and all of that? And as you wrestle through all of that stuff, that is what positions you for, I think, important moments, and it can allow you to be the right person at the right time for somebody else. And it doesn't have to be a big thing like David and Goliath, where there's, you're in this auditorium and there's all these people watching, these spectators watching. The story of Joseph and his family took place in a dining room in the palace. I mean, it wasn't this big public thing, and yet it was just so foundational for all of Israel from that point on in the scriptures. And the same thing is you don't know, like, how you interact with others. You might be the right person at the right time for somebody else, and that could end up being a big part of what God is doing in the world. And so that story of Joseph, I just absolutely love, and I wish I had time to talk more about that, and I really wish I had more time to break it down from this perspective. And that's why I ended up cutting it, because I didn't feel like, okay, I haven't thought about this enough yet. But
Well, you'll be up again throughout the series, so maybe we'll circle back to that. I did really want to. We will get back to, because I know there's probably some more stuff that you want to share, but I just wanted to take this moment to say that I did really appreciate how at the tail end of your sermon you talked about just the everyday people in your life who really impacted your faith, and the encouragement to us. That we're hearing what you had to say, that, it's not the superstars, it's not the bigwig. I mean, yes, everyone has their place and their value in the kingdom, but it is just everyday occurrences and situations and the people that we're in relationship with that can really impact our faith. I just thought that was a really cool way to push that point forward. And I really hope people grabbed onto that.
Yeah, I think it is an important point too, because I think it's the trend. I consider that the trenches. That's where the kingdom of God, I think, really moves, is in those, especially in like relationships that you're with people every day, family, roommates, things like that, coworkers. And I think that, so often, and this is one of the things I left out also, part of tereoing is to defend the teachings of Scripture and to defend the teachings of our Lord Jesus. And so often you have people who are they're seekers, but they're seeking from an attacking perspective. And until you put this hat on, like, well, what if this is true and how might I defend it? Because there's a lot of people who will say, well, how can you believe in God if X, Y, and Z? that's a good question. How would you defend that? I mean, how would you defend the case of belief in God, given X, Y, and Z, given the problem of evil, given science or whatever? And so a lot of times people they come at it with skepticism. And I think skepticism is really good as a shield to protect ourselves. But it's not a good sword. And I think a lot of people use skepticism as a sword to tear down other things instead of using it as to protect them. Anyway, that's a lot of, I kind of feel like I'm going all over the place a little bit.
No,
the point is that I think that part of it is being a defender of, even if you might have some, I don't know about this, but let me see if I can come up with a defense. Let me see if I can come up with a reason why this might be good. And I think that's a big part of it, but yeah.
I thought you were looking down at your,
well, I do, I have other stuff, but I feel like it's a little jumbly, so I'm going to let it breathe. I'm going to let it breathe for a little while.
Let it breathe, let it simmer. And like I said, it could always come back up. I do want to say that I think it's, okay. So from your sermon, you talked about the questions that you had, and I love it. Like, because it's so true. Like, I don't think to follow Jesus means that we have to jettison our intelligence and be like, man, it doesn't matter. Logic, science, math, none of it matters, just have faith. So, but I do think you just made an important point to that, is that seeking is good and valuable, but that is very different than attacking. So asking questions, really seeking to understand, that's different than, attacking something because you don't want to believe it. So I feel like God always welcomes our seeking and our questions. Absolutely. But at some point we have to check the motives of our heart to see, I think
that's really well said. I think that's really well said, because so often people, and we all do this, we'll have a tone. We try to find the right tone for our encounters. And sometimes, like, that's what I've always said, like, people who are skeptical, it's not just the arguments they have that is the issue. It's the tone in which they are given it. It's like, you can tell by the tone that people will share a lot of times that there's no chance that you're going to convince this person. Even though they ask a sincere question, they're not really sincerely open to a possible answer. And you can tell that by the tone they use. And so that's where I think part of wearing this, part of tereoing something, is to have the right tone, is to have the, I'm told to do this and I trust my Lord. I don't understand why this is good. I need to kind of figure this out. And someone says, well, yeah, why would you do that when it could cause you, financial problems if you were to do that? That's a good question. I need to figure this out. And you just keep wrestling with it, but not from a, why would you do that? But more of a, wonder what God is doing here kind of perspective. And that's a totally different tone. But that is what tereo, I think, means, is to have that more open-minded kind of trusting tone, even in the face of not understanding what we're called to do. So I think that's right.
Good stuff. All right. I have one question for you, Dan, and then we will go to nugget time.
All right.
So my question is, it's really more something I want you to talk a little bit more about. So tereo, keeping, defending, living word, living faith. Love that. And you encouraged us in that. And you also encouraged us, or rather discouraged, maybe you encouraged us not to do something, and you discouraged us from doing the something, which is reading Revelation as like a script, and so I just would love for you just to talk a little bit more about the difference. Like, how are we to keep the words of this prophecy while not seeing Revelation as a fixed script?
Yeah. So what I would say is, I wouldn't say that the Revelation is a fixed script. I would say that the danger is to think that the future is a fixed script that Revelation points to. And so, because I think it's the exact opposite. I think that the script is not fixed. There's still lots of possibility. There's still lots of potential. The end result is guaranteed, that we will dwell with God. But what that looks like and what it looks like to get there still seems like it's wide open. And you see that all throughout Scripture, where God's expectations are thwarted and things were going to go this way, but then they go that way. And God is constantly giving his people choices to for holiness or unholiness, and life or death, blessings and curses, and all of that. And so in that spirit, I think that Revelation helps prepare us for an uncertain, unsure future by pointing us and orienting us to the one thing that is absolutely sure, and that is that we will dwell with God at the end, and that God's love for us is demonstrated in the slain lamb, in Christ on the cross, and that love that he has for us is unsurpassable, and that love will defeat whatever enemy is thrown against it, as scary as that might look. And it might look really scary, and things might get really dark, but even in the face of the really preposterously dark and scary things like armored locusts and like dragons waiting to consume your child and all of that scary stuff, even in the most scary thing that you can conceive of, love is going to win. And so fix your heart and your mind on that, and that will prepare you for whatever uncertainty, whatever possible future might come upon us. And so that's what I think it means. And tereoing means to continue to guard that hope that you have that love will win, because it's going to get threatened. I mean, it's going to look so dark, and things aren't going to work out here. This idea that, well, if I had the right faith, then things would work out for my life. Nowhere in the early church is that the case. It did not work out for them. Their hope was not that it would work out here and that they would, whatever. I mean, whatever their earthly dreams might have been. It's so yeah. So tereoing means to continue to hope that love is going to win, and that the slain lamb holds the key to this beautiful promise that we will dwell with God and that he will wipe away every tear.
That's so good, Dan. Do you know, it's unfortunate because sometimes you and I see things that of course others can't see because of the way we have the camera angles going. But 2 quick questions. One, do you realize like you're a little like, gonna be okay? It's
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like oh, and 2, can you tell when you're answering a question that I've given you, can you tell when I'm liking your answer?
Yeah, I can tell a little bit. Yes, I can. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah. Well, because I have it in person view, so that then your image is like really small up on the top, but I can still see a little activity up there. So yeah.
Yeah. Good.
That's
Yeah.
pretty funny.
Oh, all right, sir. Awesome job with Sunday sermon, with the wardrobe, with the movie reference, with today's MuseCast, the summary, the dialogue, all of it. Just bravo. But now I need one more thing from you.
One more. Okay. Let's do it.
It's time.
Woo.
It's time.
All right.
Do you want me to go first? Do you need a moment? Are you ready to go? Okay.
I have a really easy one.
All right.
This is really simple and short. So if you need to prepare, I'll talk slower. So no, my nugget is simply this. The verse says, "Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and who keep what is written." So I focused on the word keep, but here is also important. And I think that there's a lot that I could have done a sermon on the word hear, because there's so many times we don't listen. We actually just project, or we interpret through the lenses of all the stuff that we have, and we don't really listen for what are they saying from their perspective. And I think that hearing is so important. In fact, what I would argue is that I think that hearing is kind of the first act of love, is listening well, and because you can't love someone, I think, effectively unless you understand them, and you can't really understand them unless you've really listened to them and understood like their situation and their perspective. And so I didn't really talk about hearing in the sermon, but I just think that being good listeners, and listening well, just not even to people that or interact with, but listening to society. And Jesus said in Matthew 9 that, well, he doesn't say it, but Matthew says it, that Jesus saw the crowds and he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless. And you see the things in the news, and you see the things that people do, and part of loving them is listening to how harassed they are and how they're doing things that you might think are crazy, but obviously they wouldn't want to be doing that stuff either, but they're helpless. And so that's part of love, is listening to that and seeing how harassed the people are and how helpless they are to their situation. And so that's the part that I cut out. And so I think that the nugget is to listen in a terreo way, listen through the lens of the slain lamb, listen to the other people as they are hurt, and if they're doing something, that even the things that you loathe that they're doing, listen as the lamb would listen, which is to listen for their harassment and the helplessness that they have, and how they've been bullied into this situation by a world that is not very godly. And I think that that's the first step to loving.
Good job. I love it. My nugget is a reflection that I've had since listening to your sermon. And that is, the thing that kept coming to me among all the things that stood out was I just kept sensing like community. Like, when even just the verse you read, blessed are those who hear and who keep, like, that's not just, that felt to me like very communal. That's like a group of people that are hearing these words together and keeping these words together. And it just reminds me how very important it is, and it will continue to be in the days ahead, for us to have people in our lives that we can work this stuff out with. We know that the world is chaotic. We know that the chaos is not going to go anywhere anytime soon, until the end. But we also know how the end, what it looks like. We just don't know how it happens. And so as we're living our life, knowing that in the end, we will be reconciled with God, and everything will be reconciled to God, I think together we need to hold one another up and encourage and challenge, and just remember that there will be things that will come against us, our faith, those that we love, those we're in community with, and we need to together fight those things in the ways of the kingdom. Not fight like the world fights, but whatever is being attacked, I feel like keeping the spirit of Jesus is what is going to help us. But we can't do that alone. That's my whole point. We can't do it alone. We need other people. And then I will conclude by saying that as we need other people need us. And I think that was one of the beautiful parts of Dan's sermon, was when he just shared about people in his life that really encouraged him. And you said, Dan, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be where I am today if it were not for these certain people. And I just think, not to build ourselves up. That's not what this is about. But we are in relationship with people. We have encounters with people, and you just never know how God will flow through you to other people. And so just be aware with dark times, with chaotic times, with troubling times, whatever, just know that you need others, but others need you. So allow yourself to love well, to listen well, to defend well, just to be used of Jesus in whatever ways he presents to you.
Yeah, that's well said. And I think just to riff off of that just for a quick moment, I think people a lot of times will kind of leave the church because of the people there, and that's something that those people should listen to. But also the people who leave a church because of the people there, well, they're one of the people there, and they can participate in changing that culture. And in fact, maybe the fact that they are turned off by something at that church might be God nudging them, saying, hey, this church needs you. And so, but a lot of times we think as consumers, we don't think, like you said, as part of a community. We think as consumers. And so we look at all the products and say whether we like that product or not, instead of saying, where does this church need me and what I have? And a lot of times the things that you don't like about the church, that should be the good news of, hey, this church might need me. And so I think that's a really good word.
Awesome. Well, this conversation, unfortunately, has to come to an end. But that also means that we'll get to another sermon and we'll have another conversation. So we thank you for tuning in. Thank you for chatting. If you have questions, comments, send them in to musecast@whchurch.org. It'll be somewhere on your screen. Thank you, Dan. Make sure to give Dan a shout out. Share with him, what impacted you from the sermon. Hey, like he said, gathering groups are a great way to keep the conversation going. MuseCast chat while you're watching is a great way to keep the conversation going. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Take care, everyone.
See you guys.